Good morning. You're watching the Woke Free Economy Report, episode 2. My name is Alex Wallenwein, and the title of this episode today is War by Corporation. What do we mean by that? Have you ever been attacked by a corporation before? Probably not to your knowledge, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. What we're experiencing right now is nothing short of an all-out war on everything that we value as Americans. War on our freedom ahead of everything else. War on our individuality. War on our choices. War on the way we live. War on the freedom of expression. And war on our country by foreign countries and by domestic actors. Those domestic actors mainly are the large global corporations, whether they're based in America or not, because when it comes to corporations, it doesn't matter where they're from. They have no allegiance to the country of origin. They're in business to do business, and in order to do so, they prefer to operate in an environment that has as little, shall we say, differences in terms of legal jurisdictions, regulations, and things of that nature. A global corporation hates to operate an environment where every country and every region within that country sometimes has its own laws, its own regulations, its own jurisdiction, its own courts, especially when it comes to taxing authority. It makes business very, very difficult for them, and for that reason they prefer a world in which countries don't exist. That's their holy grail. So, you could argue that it's not even ill will that makes them be that way. However, it is self-interest. And that self-interest naturally is opposed to those of us who are individuals who need countries and the security those countries provide as national entities to live our lives the way we choose them. Now, naturally, the American experiment has produced a country that has an absolutely unprecedented amount of freedom that it provides to us by design, by the way it was set up. And that has been very, very difficult for them to counter. Because in other countries, it's easy, especially oppressive countries, it's easy to turn the people against their so-called rulers, because very often in other countries and throughout human history, the rulers have oppressed the people. Now, granted, in America it's becoming more and more like that. But our problem is not primarily our rulers or our politicians, our government. The corporations control us through our government because they are the ones who fund politicians' re-election campaigns through direct donations and through, shall we call them, what do they call them? The PAC donations or soft donations to political parties. Hardly any individual has the power to amass and to bundle their donations in the same way big corporations have. Big corporations have unusual sway over their employees because naturally their employees want to suck up to them and keep their jobs. So when there is some kind of, pressure to vote one way or another, or to at least make political donations one way or another, the employees of that company usually acquiesce because they feel that they are powerless and the company can fire them at will in most states. So they usually give in to that very quickly, very easily, because after all, it's their job that's on the line. And a lot of people aren't all that political, so they don't really care where the money goes or what happens with it, as long as they can keep their job. Now, here's the problem with corporations, especially since China, communist China, has entered the World Trade Organization. Our American or so-called American corporations have gone to China to do business. China has a huge market to offer, has cheap labor to offer, so they can get it both ways. They set up shop in communist China, they get to sell some to the huge Chinese public, and they get to use cheap labor rates to produce products that they can sell then at a huge profit to Americans here at home. So essentially, as an aside, through that systems we have all now financed slave labor in China, because we created the incentive for China to provide us with that slave labor in order to attract these corporations. We have also financed live organ donations. That's a subject for another video. In the process of that happening, our corporations were naturally subjected to Chinese communist dogma and were forced to comply with Chinese law. And Chinese law is not common law. Chinese law is what the party wants. Law doesn't even matter over there. You could have a written law, and if the party wants something else, that's what counts. So our corporations had to set up shop under the condition that everything that they build over there, when they leave and go back to America or abandon these premises for whatever reason, everything belongs to China. China has stolen trade secrets that way en masse, because all the employees that work there, all the Chinese people that work there, have turned into de facto spies, because they have to obey the party. These companies also, as a condition of doing business in China, had to accept Chinese Communist Party members or CCP members in their boardrooms. That means not just their Chinese national boardrooms, but into international headquarter boardrooms. The totality of that influence has caused our corporations to become what we now know as woke corporations. Wokeness is really nothing other than Marxist ideology dressed up in social justice warrior garb. It may be a thin overlay, it may not be who they really are, but they effectively have become that, and they work in that direction. Most notably, BlackRock, the largest investment company in the world at this point, has just set up shop in China and has been authorized as the first investment banking company ever to service the Chinese market. BlackRock and its CEO, Larry Fink, famously have led the shall we say, thrust among American corporations to become social justice warriors or woke soldiers. Political correctness out the wazoo, and supposedly the profit motive is not so important anymore as being a good global citizen, protecting the environment. All sounds very nice. But the upshot of it is that these corporations do not work in the interest of America. Have not for a longest time, and it will get worse. can be seen very clearly. Last year, when BLM and Antifa, or I'll call them Nazifa because they really are Nazis, who claim to be anti-fascist, but they really are fascist in the way they operate and what they pursue as their true goal, not as their claimed goals. BLM and Antifa riots last year after the death of George Floyd have made very clear where our top corporations stand. BLM is an admitted Marxist organization. Patrisse Cullors and others at the top echelon of the BLM management, not the Bureau of Land Management, but Black Lives Matter movement, have admitted on record, on video, that they are trained Marxists. And that's the truth. A 137 of the world's top corporations, almost all of them based here in the United States, are making donations to Black Lives Matter. Marxists supporting Marxists. Later, after the election debacle last year, when the state of Georgia, in its absolute, total, unquestioned sovereignty under the Constitution, decided to propose and pass a election integrity law or statute, 100 of the top corporations of America openly, publicly attacked the state of Georgia for doing that. This is how you know who they are. They're not just serving our needs, they're not just selling products and services to us that we like and that we want and that we're willing to pay for. They are directly and openly influencing our governments at the state level and at the federal level. I also want to remind you of the Time magazine article which praised the actions of a whole number of corporations and other private, so-called private organizations that saved our country from Donald Trump. By doing what? By cheating during the election process. They patted themselves on the back for doing what they have done. They openly admitted it. And then on the other hand, they claim, oh, there was no fraud in the election. To them, it's not fraud. To them, anything that serves communism or the overarching goal of turning this country communist, eventually, is legal. Perfectly okay, nothing wrong with it. If it violates the Constitution, if it violates state law, oh, so what? Casualty of war. Now that's who we're up against. We already dealt with the topic how these corporations got to where they are, how they became so powerful in the last episode number 1. And the simple truth of it is, they did it with your and my money. Our money. The American patriots' money. As we will soon see, American patriots are the majority in this country, unquestionably. For right now, we can extrapolate from the official numbers how many of us there are. Supposedly, 75 million people or thereabouts voted for Donald Trump. Now, you know that anybody who voted for Donald Trump is not going to look kindly upon attempts to take away our freedom of speech, our freedom of association, freedom of religion, or freedom of conscience as it's actually called, and things of that nature. So we know we're at least 75 million strong, but you can figure pretty easily that we're far more than that, because not only people who support Trump want to keep this constitutional structure that we have, this rule of law that protects individuals from the power of the majority and the power of the state. let's say we're 100 million people strong, and they became that huge overarching enemy as a class, the corporate class, the 2%ers, let's call them that, or maybe 1%ers, whatever you want to call it. They are openly making war on us in many different ways, and we're going to deal with that subject in more detail as to exactly how they make war on us. They even combine with foreign countries such as China, such as Iran, and to some degree Russia, in order to interfere in our election process. Not just interfere, in order to control our election process and to take it away from us, and to enable them to put up there whoever they want, but to fake the numbers to the degree that nobody can overcome them anymore. That is an attack on our national security, and Trump has correctly identified that and has made several executive orders against it. Now, so we're at war with the corporations then, or they're at war with us. We didn't pick this war. It was brought to our doorstep by the very puppies that we fed. How do we win this? There's some basic principles of war that are universally recognized and that nobody can ignore unless it's at their own peril. Sun Tzu, a famous Chinese philosopher of thousands of years ago, stated, if you know your enemy, you win the war 50% of the time. If you know yourself, you win the war 50% of the time. If you know your enemy and yourself, you win 100% of the time. There's also another famous principle that is recognized by all strategists or strategicians or whatever you want to call them. And that is, in order to win a war, you have to control the battlefield. You have to pick your battles wisely and fight them where you know you can win. Best example of that is General Houston's war against Santa Ana. Overwhelming numbers, retreat for months on end until he saw the right terrain, until he said, now we can win, and then he attacked. And that leads us to the third principle. You cannot win a war by defending yourself, and that's been the problem of the Freudian slip. That's been the problem of the conservative movement, because the very name of it tells you that there is a defensive ideology or a defensive philosophy at work. Defending in battle, defending in war, it's necessary, but it will never lead to victory. If you are conservative, you conserve, you preserve, you defend, but you don't attack. Let's look at progressives on the other hand. What does that very name imply? It applies attack. It applies constant approaching, constant advancing, constant encroaching on the territory of the enemy. And what have the socialists done? What have the communists done? That's exactly what they have done. They're constantly squeezing, pushing, inching, advancing from all angles, from above, from below, from the left, from the right. So we know we need to attack. We need to know our enemy. We need to know ourselves. We need to control the battlefield. We need to attack. And we need to have superior weaponry. But we're fighting economic war here. We're not talking about killing people. We're talking about pulling triggers and aiming barrels. What's our weapon? Our weapon is our wallet. You carry it in your back pocket every day, or in your purse, or maybe in your breast pocket. I don't know where you put it. There's nothing more powerful than that in economic warfare, because there is no economy without the people who spend their money in it, and that's us. That's we the people. That shows you what geniuses our founders were. We are where the power is. We are the power base. All attempts to defeat us so far had to be based on dividing us, fighting each other instead of them, or co-opting us to some degree and leading us in the wrong direction against the fictitious enemy. So the real enemy can pose as our leaders and take us where they want us to go instead of where we want to go. If you are a believer in Jesus Christ, you also know that if you fight your war, if you want to continue to fight your war with success and ultimately win, you have to do it His way. We're not pursuing a torched earth strategy. We're not out to kill anyone. We're not out to take anything away from anyone that rightfully belongs them. We're not talking about theft. We're not talking about sabotage. We're not talking about deceit. We're not talking about any of those things that they level against us. What we're talking about is fighting our war righteously with moral backing. God is never on our side if we're not on God's side. Countries that claim God is on our side, they better make sure that they're on God's side. Otherwise, it's just an empty phrase. If we want to win, we have to be on God's side. There's no two ways about it. If we are, and we use these weapons and these tactics that we're proposing here, we cannot lose. We control everything. In a war where you have the most powerful weapon, where you control the battlefield, where you know your enemy and you know yourself, there's no chance the enemy winning. You just have to do it. You just have to follow a few steps. Now, this is an unusual war, the way we're fighting it, because the risk is all on the other side. What we have to lose is only what we can lose if we fight not. If we do nothing. If we don't counterattack. If we acquiesce. If we remain peaceful, meaning inactive. That's when we lose. That's where our risk lies. If we take action, what additional risks do we load up upon ourselves? Under normal circumstances, you can't win a fight, you can't win a battle if you don't risk losing. But the situation that we have been put in, we're already facing immediate and almost inevitable loss. We're already there. We don't have to pick that burden up and shoulder it and say, okay, I'm going to fight. Knowing this. It's already on us. So we have no choice but to fight back, and we better fight well. The means of attack is simply to withhold our money from the woke, communist, CCP-influenced corporations and give it to patriot companies. Give it to ourselves. They cannot exist losing 1/3 of their customer base here in the United States. Once we win this war, maybe they can still exist in China and other countries, maybe not. But certainly they will not be able to exist over here, because their overhead structure being what it is, their fixed costs being what they are, if they lose 1/3 of their customer base, there's no way they can pay their bills. There's no way they can produce and fund the selling structure, the sales structure that they have built up in order to bring their products and services to market, which means to us. They cannot support that anymore without our support. But there's no law in the world that tells you where you have to spend your money. It doesn't exist. There have been attempts, for example, the anti-BDS or the anti-boycott, divest, and whatever the S stands for laws. BDS movement basically is a movement against the state of Israel to try and boycott them because of what they do to the Palestinian population. And you may sympathize with that cause or not, that's not the issue here. The point is that our governments, our state governments specifically, have passed laws in almost all states now that try to inhibit people's ability to do this. But they're restricted to saying, okay, if you're active in boycotting Israel, you can no longer contract with the state for whatever it is that you have contracted with the state for in the past. Or you can think about doing that in the future if you haven't done it yet. They cannot make it illegal still. They're trying to kill our freedom of speech, even on that front. And here, by the way, is an example of conservative anti-freedom action. These laws are supported by both factions, both Democrats and Republicans. Want to push those laws through their legislatures in order to stifle our freedom of speech and our freedom of decision. Where do we spend our money? What do we support? There's an example. So there are movements in that direction, but as of this time right now, nobody can tell you to buy Coca-Cola versus some other soft drink company that you prefer. Nobody can tell you to go to Bank of America instead of a local credit union, maybe. Nobody can tell you to go and buy your groceries at Randall's instead of at Kroger's, or to buy your stereo equipment from Walmart instead of from whatever. There's no Radio Shack anymore, but let's say Best Buy. You have absolute power to make those decisions. Not just power, but right. No law exists against that. Do you realize the power of that? You're doing what you're already doing every day. You don't have to change your life. You don't have to barricade yourself in your living room or in your house, in your apartment. You don't have to cut and run to the country and live in a shack under a tree somewhere in order to be safe from what's coming. You don't have to withdraw all your money and put it in gold or whatever other investments, even though that's not a bad idea. But none of that is required. You don't have to arm yourself to your teeth with guns and bullets, although that's not a bad idea either. What you have to do is get together, band together, and discipline yourself not to ever, whenever you have a chance, not to give your money to a woke company. If you order something online, don't order it from Amazon. Find a smaller outfit. Maybe you'll pay a few dollars more, but refuse to give your money, refuse to give your power to the enemy. Refuse to give your enemy the very weapon that the enemy uses to defeat you and to hold you basically in slavery. If you have a chance to work for a non-woke employer, quit your job, move over to the non-woke employer. On the Woke Free Economy website, wokefreeeconomy.com, all one word, we will have employment opportunities. We will have sections there for statesmen, not politicians, who are truly working for us patriots and for the constitutional system we live under, not for the enemy. We will have all of that. But that website needs to be populated. The most effective, the most powerful, and the easiest thing that you can do is right now, go to the link in the description under this video. Click on wokefreeeconomy.com and create a free account. In the description, there are also action items, steps that you can do, and would be well advised to do them every day, or find ways to remind yourself to do them every day that can help you win this war. There is no we without you. There is no we the people without you, the individual. You are the most powerful force in this country, in this universe even, short of God. Because you have the power to choose God, and when you do, you are saved from the attacks of the devil. You are saved from your own sin nature. And even the devil himself with all his hordes cannot defeat you in the end. He can throw rocks in your path, he can make life difficult for you, but he cannot defeat you. The strategic victory has already been won by Jesus Christ on the cross. So help us do this. Help us work for the good of all American patriots. Help us work for the good of our country. Help us protect our country. Help us rebuild our country with the patriot economy, with the woke-free economy. If you do this, and if you talk to enough other people about doing this, our victory is guaranteed. If you can name any reason why it would not be, I want to hear from you. Post your opinions in the comment sections below, and let me know what you think is your reason why you believe that this would not work. I'm very interested, because I don't know everything. Maybe I'm wrong. And if there is something, I want to know about it, so I can figure out a way, we all together can figure out a way how to avoid that, how to win anyway. So thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.